Welcome, everyone. Where are you tuning in from today? Drop your city in the comments and let's see how far this story travels. Picture Tiana Brooks, a stunning woman with smooth brown skin, bright eyes, and a confident smile, striding into Elite Trust Bank. Her style, effortlessly simple. White t-shirt, light blue jeans, white sneakers, and a plain canvas bag, her curly hair tied neatly back. But when she hands over her Platinum Elite Black card, the teller, Sarah, smirks, holding it with two fingers like it's tainted. "You sure there's money in this?" she sneers. Then the screen flashes Tiana's balance and Sarah's mocking grin vanishes. Her jaw drops, hands trembling. Tiana, unfazed, pulls out her phone and makes a call that flips everything. Who's she calling? What happens next? Subscribe now for our latest stories, share your guesses below, and stick around to uncover the jaw-dropping twist. The morning sun spilled golden rays across the glass towers of downtown, each skyscraper glinting like a promise of wealth and power. At the heart of this urban symphony stood the Elite Trust Bank, its marble facade towering over the bustling street, a monument to financial prestige. On this crisp Tuesday, Tiana Brooks, a 32-year-old black millionaire, stepped through its revolving doors, her presence as unassuming as a whisper in a storm. Her smooth brown skin glowed under the soft light. Her bright eyes scanned the lobby with quiet confidence, and her lips curved into a subtle, self-assured smile. She wore a simple white t-shirt that hugged her frame, light blue jeans faded just enough to feel lived in, and pristine white sneakers that squeaked faintly on the polished floor. A plain canvas bag hung from her shoulder, and her natural curly hair was swept into a neat ponytail, each coil a testament to her unapologetic authenticity. To the untrained eye, Tiana was just another face in the crowd, perhaps a teacher or a freelancer popping in to deposit a check. But beneath this understated exterior lay a fortune forged from her tech startup, sold 3 years ago for a sum that made headlines. Her wealth, tucked away in accounts at this very bank, was a closely guarded secret, known only to a select few, including her childhood friend Olivia Grant, the CEO of Elite Trust. Tiana had entrusted her millions to Olivia's institution, believing in its promise of professionalism and integrity. Today, she needed just $5,000 in cash for a shopping spree with her mother, Evelyn, who waited at a nearby cafe, likely sipping chamomile tea and flipping through a magazine. The lobby of Elite Trust was a cathedral of commerce, its high ceilings adorned with crystal chandeliers that cast prismatic flecks across the marble floors. Tellers in crisp navy uniforms moved with practiced efficiency behind a long mahogany counter, their name tags gleaming under fluorescent lights. The air carried the faint scent of polished wood and expensive cologne, mingling with the soft hum of conversation and the rhythmic click of keyboards. Customers dotted the space, a businessman in a tailored suit barking into his phone, a woman in a designer dress clutching a leather portfolio, an elderly couple clutching deposit slips with trembling hands. Tiana took it all in, her sharp mind cataloging every detail as she lingered near a plush leather chair in the waiting area. She hadn't been there 30 seconds before she noticed the first slight. A young teller, his badge reading Jake, glanced her way, his eyes skimming over her casual attire before dismissing her with a flicker of disinterest. He turned instead to a white man in a pinstripe suit who'd just entered, striding over with a grin that could sell a mortgage. "Good morning, sir. Right this way to our premium services desk," Jake chirped, ushering the man past the line, to a private office. Tiana's brow twitched, but she held her composure, her fingers brushing the strap of her bag. She wasn't here to make a scene. Not yet. Minutes ticked by. A woman in a sleek red dress approached the counter, and another teller, a blonde with a badge reading Sarah, greeted her with a dazzling smile. "Mrs. Langley, so lovely to see you again. How's the new beach house?" Sarah's voice was honey-sweet, her hands swift as she processed the woman's transaction. Tiana watched, her gaze narrowing as Sarah handed over a receipt with a flourish, then turned to chat idly with a colleague. Meanwhile, an elderly Asian man in a worn jacket approached the same counter, only to be met with a curt, Take a number and wait over there." No smile, no warmth, just a pointed finger toward the seating area. Tiana's jaw tightened. She'd seen this dance before, the subtle hierarchy of who gets respect and who gets ignored. Growing up, she'd navigated countless rooms where her skin and style marked her as less than before she could even speak. But she'd clawed her way to the top, building an empire with nothing but grit and genius. This bank, her bank, was supposed to be different. Olivia had promised a place where every client mattered. Yet here, in this gleaming lobby, the same. Old biases slithered beneath the surface, dressed up in pressed uniforms and corporate jargon. Another customer caught her eye, a Hispanic woman in a nurse's scrubs, clutching a paycheck. A teller named Mark scrutinized her ID with exaggerated care, asking for a second form of identification, while the woman shifted uncomfortably. Tiana's fingers curled into her palm. She'd been that woman once, standing at a counter while someone decided whether she belonged. The memory stung, but it also steeled her resolve. She wasn't here to be invisible. 10 minutes had passed, and not one of the half-dozen tellers had acknowledged her. Jake, now back at his station, whispered something to Sarah, who glanced at Tiana and stifled a laugh. "Probably here to open a savings account with $50, Jake muttered, loud enough for Tiana to catch. Sarah's lips twitched, her eyes darting away as if Tiana were a minor inconvenience, like a smudge on the counter. The words landed like a spark in dry grass, igniting a quiet fury in Tiana's chest. She wasn't angry for herself. She'd faced worse and come out stronger. No, this was about the principle, the insult to every person who'd ever been dismissed for how they looked or who they were. Tiana adjusted her bag, her movements deliberate, and took a step toward the counter. Her sneakers squeaked again, a small sound that seemed to echo in the suddenly stifling air. The chandeliers above glittered, the marble gleamed, but the warmth of the bank's facade felt like a lie. She wasn't just a customer, she was a force, a woman who'd turned dreams into millions. And if these tellers thought they could judge her by her jeans and t-shirt, they were about to learn a lesson they'd never forget. With a steady breath, she approached Sarah's station, her eyes locking onto the teller's name tag. The game was about to begin. The air in the Elite Trust Bank's lobby seemed to thicken as Tiana Brooks approached the mahogany counter, her sneakers whispering. Against the marble floor, the chandeliers above cast their cold, prismatic light, but the warmth of the bank's opulent facade had long since faded for her. She stood before Sarah's station, the teller's name tag glinting like a challenge. Sarah, with her tightly bound blonde hair and a smile that never reached her eyes, was busy shuffling papers, her movements deliberate, as if Tiana's presence were an interruption she could barely tolerate. The other tellers, Jake, Mark, and a woman named Lisa, continued their tasks, but their sidelong glances and stifled smirks betrayed a shared assumption. This woman, in her white t-shirt and jeans, didn't belong here. Tiana's bright eyes locked onto Sarah's, her posture straight, exuding a quiet confidence that belied her casual attire. She adjusted the canvas bag on her shoulder, its worn strap a stark contrast to the gleaming leather briefcases clutched by other patrons. "Good morning," Tiana said, her voice clear and measured, cutting through the hum of the lobby. "I'd like to withdraw some cash." The words were simple, routine, but they carried the weight of a woman who knew her worth, even if the world around her refused to see it. Sarah's gaze flicked up, her lips pursing as she took in Tiana's appearance. White sneakers, faded jeans, the unassuming ponytail of natural curls. Her eyes lingered a moment too long, a silent judgment etched into the crease of her brow. "Cash," she repeated, her tone laced with skepticism, as if the request were absurd. She leaned back slightly, crossing her arms, her navy blazer straining at the elbows. "What kind of withdrawal are we talking about?" The question wasn't an inquiry. It was a gate, a barrier erected to keep Tiana in her place. Tiana's fingers brushed the edge of her bag, where her Platinum Elite black card rested, its surface slightly worn from years of quiet use. She reached in, retrieving the card and her driver's license, and slid them across the counter with a deliberate calm. The card, a symbol of wealth reserved for the bank's most exclusive clients, gleamed faintly under the fluorescent lights. "Just a small amount," Tiana said, her smile polite but unyielding. $5,000 should do." Sarah's eyes narrowed as she reached for the card, her manicured nails hovering before she picked it up with 2 fingers, holding it as if it might contaminate her. She turned it over, inspecting the faded edges with a smirk that curled her. "Psst. This is a Platinum Elite card," she said, her voice dripping with mockery. "You sure this is yours? These aren't handed out to just anyone." The words landed like a slap, sharp and intentional, designed to humiliate. A ripple of laughter came from Jake, who leaned against the counter nearby, pretending to organize deposit slips but eavesdropping. "Probably borrowed it from someone," he muttered, loud enough for Tiana to hear. Tiana's jaw tightened, a spark of fury igniting in her chest. She'd faced condescension before, store clerks who followed her, professors who questioned her intellect, colleagues who assumed her success was luck. But this, in a bank where her millions were entrusted, cut deeper. Her mind flashed to her mother, Evelyn, waiting at the cafe, her warm laugh and unwavering belief in Tiana's dreams. She wouldn't let these petty slights ruin their day. "It's mine," Tiana replied, her voice steady, each syllable a defiance. "You can verify it with my ID." Sarah's smirk widened as she picked up the driver's license, holding it up to the light as if searching for a flaw. She tilted her head, glancing between the photo and Tiana's face, her scrutiny exaggerated, performative. She hummed, drawing out the sound. "Let's see if this checks out." She turned to her computer, her fingers tapping the keys with a slowness that felt deliberate, a power play to keep Tiana waiting. The screen glowed, but Sarah's expression remained smug, as if she expected the system to confirm her suspicions. Behind her, Jake whispered to Lisa, "Bet it's a fake. No way she's got that kind of account." Lisa stifled a giggle, her eyes darting to Tiana before returning to her customer, a white man in a suit who was being served with effusive courtesy. The contrast was stark. His transaction sailed, through with smiles and small talk, while Tiana stood under a microscope, her every move dissected. A Hispanic woman at the next counter, dressed in a delivery uniform, was being asked for a second ID, her face flushed with frustration. The pattern was clear, woven into the fabric of this place, and Tiana felt its weight pressing against her. The lobby buzzed with activity, but the space around Tiana felt like a vacuum, her presence reduced to a spectacle for the teller's amusement. A middle-aged white woman in pearls waiting nearby clutched her purse tighter as she glanced at Tiana, her lips pursed in disapproval. The silent judgments piled up, each one a brick in the wall of exclusion that Tiana had spent her life dismantling. Yet she stood tall, her composure a shield, her silence a weapon. She knew the power she held, the wealth that dwarfed the egos before her. But she also knew the game. She'd play it for now, letting their arrogance build before she struck. Sarah's fingers paused on the keyboard, her eyes flicking to Tiana with a glint of challenge. "This is going to take a minute," she said, her tone falsely apologetic. "We have to be careful with these kinds of accounts." The words these carried a venom, a coded jab at Tiana's appearance, her race, her audacity to exist in this space. Jake snorted, covering his mouth while Lisa busied herself with papers, her shoulders shaking with suppressed laughter. The air crackled with tension, a storm brewing in the space between Tiana's calm and Sarah's scorn. Tiana's hand rested on the counter, her nails tapping once, twice, a subtle signal that she was done being underestimated. The next move was hers, and the tellers, blissfully ignorant, had no idea what was coming. The Elite Trust Bank's lobby pulsed with a quiet hum, but at Sarah's counter the air crackled with unspoken hostility. Tiana Brooks stood resolute, her smooth brown skin catching the chandelier's glint, her bright eyes fixed on the teller who seemed determined to dismantle her dignity. The Platinum Elite black card and her driver's license lay on the mahogany counter, their presence a silent rebuke to Sarah's earlier sneer. Tiana's request for a $5,000 withdrawal hung in the air. Simple yet somehow provocative in this space where her casual white t-shirt and jeans marked her as an outsider. The canvas bag on her shoulder felt heavier now, not from its contents, but from the weight of every eye in the room. Tellers, customers, even the security guard by the door. Watching, judging, waiting for her to falter. Sarah's fingers hovered over the keyboard, her earlier smirk replaced by a calculated frown, as if Tiana's request were a puzzle she was loath to solve. $5,000, she repeated, her voice slow, each syllable dripping with disbelief. She leaned forward, her navy blazer, creasing, and fixed Tiana with a stare that was less professional inquiry and more interrogation. "That's a lot of cash for someone like you." The words were a dagger, thinly veiled in corporate politeness, their meaning clear. A black woman in sneakers didn't belong in the elite echelons of elite trust. Tiana's breath caught, a familiar ache blooming in her chest, the sting of being reduced to a stereotype, no matter her millions. She straightened, her ponytail swaying slightly, and met Sarah's gaze with a calm that belied the fire within. "It's within my account's daily limit," Tiana said, her voice steady, each word a brick in the wall of her composure. "I'd like to complete the transaction now." Her tone was polite but firm, a challenge wrapped in civility, daring Sarah to push further. The teller's lips twitched, a flicker of irritation crossing her face at being contradicted. She glanced at Jake, who lounged against the counter nearby, his arms crossed, a grin playing on his lips as he watched the scene unfold like a spectator at a gladiatorial match. Sarah turned back to the computer, her fingers tapping with exaggerated care as if the system itself might reject Tiana's existence. "We need to verify a few things," she said, her voice rising just enough to draw attention from the other tellers. "Large cash withdrawals require extra checks, especially for certain accounts." The word certain landed like a stone, heavy with implication. Jake snorted, not bothering to hide his amusement, while Lisa, at the next station, paused her work to eavesdrop, her eyes darting between Sarah and Tiana. The lobby's hum seemed to fade, replaced by a tense silence that amplified every word, every gesture. Tiana's nails pressed into her palms, the slight pain grounding her. She'd built a tech empire from nothing, faced boardrooms full of skeptics who doubted her genius, yet here she was, defending her right to access her own money. The injustice burned, but she refused to let it show. "What exactly needs verifying?" she asked, her voice cool, her eyes never leaving Sarah's. "I've provided my ID and card. That should be sufficient." The question was a gauntlet, thrown down with precision, exposing the flimsiness of Sarah's excuses. Sarah's facade cracked, a flush creeping up her neck. She picked up Tiana's license again, holding it up as if it were evidence in a trial. "We've had issues with fraudulent activity lately," she said, her tone sharper now, abandoning any pretense of professionalism. "We can't just hand out cash to anyone who walks in with a fancy card." The accusation hung in the air, bold and baseless, a public shaming meant to put Tiana in her place. Jake's grin widened, and he leaned toward Lisa, whispering, "Told. You probably a scam." Lisa's lips pursed, but she said nothing, her silence complicit. The lobby's other customers began to notice. A white man in a suit, waiting at the next counter, glanced over with a raised eyebrow, his transaction sailing through with a smile from Mark. An elderly black woman clutching a deposit slip watched Tiana with a weary expression, as if she'd seen this script play out too many times. The security guard shifted uncomfortably, his hand resting on his radio, sensing the rising tension. Tiana felt their eyes like a spotlight, but she stood taller, her presence a quiet defiance. She thought of her mother, Evelyn, whose sacrifices had fueled Tiana's rise. This wasn't just about her. It was about every person who'd been dismissed, diminished, deemed unworthy. Sarah leaned in, lowering her voice to a stage whisper that carried to every corner of the counter. "Look, maybe you'd be more comfortable at a check-cashing place down the street. They're better equipped for your kind of banking." The words were a venomous arrow, aimed at Tiana's race, her attire, her very existence. Jake chuckled outright, no longer pretending to work, while Lisa's eyes widened, a flicker of unease crossing her face. The air grew heavy, the chandeliers, light suddenly harsh, illuminating the raw prejudice that had been simmering beneath the bank's polished veneer. Tiana's heart pounded, but her face remained a mask of composure. She tapped the counter once, a small, deliberate gesture that echoed like a gavel. "I'm a customer here," she said, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "And I expect to be treated as one." The words were a line in the sand, a declaration that she would not be moved. Sarah's eyes flashed with anger, her authority challenged in front of her peers. She opened her mouth to retort, but Tiana's unwavering gaze held her in check. The lobby seemed to hold its breath, the stakes rising with every second. Something was about to break, and Tiana was ready to decide what it would be. The elite. Trust Bank's lobby was a pressure cooker, the air thick with the residue of Sarah's venomous words. Tiana Brooks stood at the counter, her smooth brown skin catching the chandelier's gleam, her bright eyes burning with a resolve that could melt steel. The Platinum Elite Black Card and her driver's license rested on the mahogany surface, their presence a silent testament to her legitimacy in a space that had tried to erase her. Sarah's last barb, "Maybe you'd be more comfortable at a check-cashing place," still echoed, a gauntlet thrown down in front of a growing audience of tellers and customers. Tiana's composure was a fortress, but inside, a storm raged. She wasn't just fighting for her $5,000 withdrawal. She was battling a system that judged her worth by her genes and her skin. Sarah's fingers, poised over the keyboard, trembled slightly as she finally entered Tiana's account details, her earlier confidence fraying under the weight of Tiana's unyielding gaze. The computer screen flickered, and then it loaded, a digital revelation that struck like lightning. The balance glowed in stark black numerals: $247,893,014,056. Sarah's breath hitched, her eyes widening to saucers, the smug curl of her lips collapsing into a slack-jawed gape. Her hands froze, one hovering over the mouse, the other clutching the edge of the counter as if to anchor herself against the shock. The number wasn't just money, it was power, a fortune that dwarfed the bank's daily transactions, a truth that shattered every assumption she'd wielded like a weapon. Tiana watched the transformation with a quiet satisfaction, her lips twitching into the faintest of smiles. She leaned forward slightly, her voice low and deliberate, each word a scalpel. "Is there a problem?" The question was a trap, baiting Sarah to admit her miscalculation. The teller's face flushed a mottled red, her throat bobbing as she struggled to form a response. No, she stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's just, that's a lot of money." The admission was a crack in her armor, a confession that she'd underestimated the woman before her. Jake, who'd been smirking from his station, craned his neck to glimpse Sarah's screen. His grin vanished, replaced by a look of stunned disbelief. "No way," he muttered, his voice carrying across the counter. Lisa, caught mid-transaction with another customer, glanced over, her eyes darting to the screen before snapping back to Tiana, wide with a mix of awe and fear. The lobby's hum faltered, the other tellers pausing their work, their curiosity piqued by the sudden shift in Sarah's demeanor. Even the security guard stationed near the door tilted his head, sensing a change in the room's rhythm. Tiana's smile widened, but it wasn't warm. It was a blade, sharp and precise. "I'd like my withdrawal now," she said, her tone calm but laced with an authority that made Sarah flinch. $5,000, as I requested." She paused, letting the moment, the silence amplify the weight of her words. Then, as if struck by inspiration, she tilted her head, her eyes glinting with a dangerous spark. "You know what? Your attitudes made me reconsider. I think I'll take out a bit more today. Let's make it $100 million. In cash." The words landed like a thunderclap, reverberating through the lobby. Sarah's jaw dropped, her hands trembling so violently that she knocked a pen to the floor. Jake choked on a gasp, his arms uncrossing as he staggered back a step. Lisa's customer, a white woman in pearls, turned to stare, her transaction forgotten. The elderly black woman waiting nearby let out a soft, "Well now," her eyes twinkling with approval. The security guard's hand froze on his radio, his mouth slightly agape. The number, 100 million, wasn't just a figure. It was a declaration, a power move that turned the tables in an instant. Sarah's voice, when she finally found it, was a squeak. 100 million? The bank doesn't keep that kind of cash on hand. Her panic was palpable, her earlier arrogance reduced to a frantic scramble for control. She glanced at Jake, then Lisa, as if they could save her, but both were frozen, their faces pale. The lobby's atmosphere shifted, the customers now openly watching, their whispers forming a low buzz. Tiana stood serene amidst the chaos, her canvas bag still slung over her shoulder, her posture relaxed but commanding. "This is Elite Trust, isn't it?" Tiana asked, her voice smooth, almost playful, but with an edge that cut through the room. "The biggest bank in the city. Surely you can handle a request from a VIP client like me." The word VIP was a deliberate jab, a reminder of the card Sarah had mocked, the status she'd dismissed. Tiana's eyes never left Sarah's, pinning her in place like a butterfly under glass. The teller's hands fumbled with the keyboard, her screen still displaying the staggering balance, a silent indictment of her prejudice. The other customers began to murmur, their curiosity morphing into intrigue. A young man in a hoodie pulled out his phone, discreetly recording the scene. The white man in the suit, who'd been served so promptly, raised an eyebrow, his interest piqued. Tiana felt the shift, the tide turning in her favor, but she kept her focus on Sarah, whose panic was now a public spectacle. "I suggest you call someone who can authorize this," Tiana said, her voice steady, her smile unwavering. "Because I'm not leaving until I get what I came for." The challenge hung in the air, a spark ready to ignite the next act in this unfolding drama. The Elite Trust Bank's lobby was a crucible, its marble floors and crystal chandeliers now a stage for a drama that had spiraled beyond control. Tiana Brooks stood at the counter, her smooth brown skin glowing under the harsh fluorescent light, her bright eyes locked on Sarah, whose trembling hands betrayed the panic of a woman out of her depth. Tiana's demand for a $100 million cash withdrawal, a deliberate escalation born of Sarah's prejudice, had turned the air electric. The teller's screen still glowed with Tiana's balance, 247,893, 214.56, a number that had silenced the smirks of Jake and Lisa and drawn the stares of customers. Sarah's stammered admission that the bank couldn't provide such cash had only fueled Tiana's resolve. She stood, her white t-shirt and jeans a stark contrast to the chaos she'd unleashed, her canvas bag slung casually over her shoulder, her voice steady as she'd said, "I'm not leaving until I get what I came for." Sarah's panic reached a breaking point. Her eyes darted to the back of the lobby, where a glass-walled office loomed. I need the manager," she muttered, her voice barely audible, her fingers fumbling for the phone. She punched an extension, her words tumbling out in a frantic whisper. "Mr. Coleman, we have a situation. Please, now." The lobby's buzz grew louder, customers whispering, some craning their necks to see the unfolding spectacle. Jake, his earlier bravado gone, shifted uncomfortably while Lisa busied herself with papers, avoiding Tiana's gaze. The elderly black woman waiting nearby nodded approvingly, her lips curling into a knowing smile, as if she sensed the reckoning to come. The office door swung open, and Robert Coleman, the branch manager, emerged. A man in his late 50s, he carried himself with the practiced authority of someone who'd spent decades in banking. His gray suit was impeccably tailored, his silver hair slick, his posture rigid as he strode across the lobby, his polished shoes clicking on the marble. His face was a mask of professional concern, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of irritation. He'd been reviewing reports when Sarah's call interrupted him, and the urgency in her voice had pulled him from his desk. As he approached, the crowd parted, their murmurs fading into a tense hush. "Sarah, what's going on here?" Robert's voice was clipped, his tone that of a man accustomed to swift resolutions. He glanced at Tiana, his gaze sweeping over her white sneakers, faded jeans, and simple ponytail of natural curls. His brow furrowed, a subtle judgment forming before she could speak. To him, she looked out of place, a disruption in his orderly domain. Sarah, her face flushed, gestured toward Tiana. "This customer is requesting a $100 million cash withdrawal," she said, her voice cracking. "Her account checks out, but we don't have that kind of cash on hand. It's impossible." Her words were a plea for Robert to take control, to restore the status quo. Tiana met Robert's gaze, her expression calm but unyielding, her bright eyes piercing through his facade. "I'm Tiana Brooks," she said, her voice clear, each syllable a challenge. "I'm a client here, and I've made a legitimate request. I expect it to be honored." Her composure was a weapon, her dignity unshaken despite the scrutiny of the lobby's onlookers. Robert's lips tightened, his mind racing. A $100 million withdrawal was unheard of. Banks maintained limited cash reserves, and such a sum would require coordination across branches, perhaps days of preparation. But the balance Sarah had mentioned, over $247 million, was no fiction. He glanced at her screen, the numbers glaring back like an accusation. His initial skepticism wavered, but his instincts, honed by years of profiling clients, clung to doubt. This woman in her casual attire didn't fit the mold of a multimillionaire. "Ms. Brooks," he began, his tone patronizing, as if addressing a confused child. $100 million is an extraordinary amount. Are you certain there's no mistake? Perhaps you meant a smaller sum." His words were a velvet glove over a steel fist, suggesting error while implying incompetence. He stepped closer, his height looming over the counter, a subtle attempt to intimidate. Tiana's smile was razor-sharp, her eyes never leaving his. "No mistake, Mr. Coleman," she replied, her voice steady, cutting through his condescension. "I know exactly what I'm asking for. If Elite Trust can't handle my request, perhaps I should take my business elsewhere." The threat was subtle but seismic, a reminder of the fortune she wielded. The lobby's whispers grew, customers exchanging glances, some pulling out phones to capture the moment. Robert's face stiffened, a flush creeping up his neck. He wasn't used to being challenged, especially not in his own branch. "There's no need for that," he said quickly, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Let's review your account details to ensure everything's in order." He gestured to Sarah, who scrambled to print a transaction summary, her hands shaking, but his tone carried a trace of disbelief, as if Tiana's wealth were an anomaly, not a fact. Tiana's fingers tapped the counter, a deliberate rhythm that echoed in the tense silence. "I've provided my ID and card," she said, her voice firm. "You're questioning my legitimacy, and now you're doing the same. Is this how Elite Trust treats its VIP clients?" The question was a blade, slicing through Robert's authority. The crowd's murmurs swelled, the elderly black woman chuckling softly, her approval a quiet rebellion. Robert's smile faltered, his eyes darting to the security guard, then back to Tiana. "We take security seriously," he said, his voice tighter now. "For a transaction this size, we need to follow protocol." But his words rang hollow, a flimsy shield against Tiana's unassailable truth. He was stalling, hoping to regain control, but Tiana's presence, calm, commanding, held the room captive. The balance on the screen was undeniable, and her demand had exposed a fault line in the bank's polished facade. As Robert reached for the phone, his hand unsteady, the lobby held its breath, sensing the storm about to break. The Elite Trust Bank's lobby was a tinderbox, its marble floors reflecting the taut anticipation that gripped every soul within. Tiana Brooks stood at the counter, her smooth brown skin radiant under the chandelier's glow, her bright eyes unwavering as she faced Robert Coleman, the branch manager, whose forced smile crumbled under the weight of her $100 million withdrawal. Demand. The screen still blazed with her balance. 247,893,14.56. A silent rebuke to the prejudice that had marked her as unworthy. Sarah, the teller, hovered behind the counter, her hands trembling, her earlier sneer replaced by a pallor of dread. Jake and Lisa, once smug, now stood frozen, their eyes darting nervously. The crowd of customers, from the elderly black woman with a knowing nod to the young man discreetly filming, watched with bated breath, sensing a reckoning on the horizon. Robert's hand lingered on the phone, his fingers unsteady as he prepared to escalate the situation, his voice strained with a mix of deference and disbelief. "Ms. Brooks will need to consult with corporate for a request this size," he said, his words a flimsy attempt to regain control. Tiana's response was a single raised eyebrow, her silence more commanding than any retort. The lobby's air grew heavier, the murmurs of onlookers swelling into a low hum like the prelude to a storm. Then, the revolving doors burst open with a force that sent a gust through the room, the glass panels shuddering against their frames. Olivia Grant, CEO of Elite Trust, strode in, her presence a thunderclap that silenced the lobby. Her tailored navy suit hugged her frame, the deep blue a stark contrast to her mahogany skin, her heels clicking with purpose on the marble. Her eyes sharp and unyielding swept the room, landing on Tiana with a mix of fury and sorrow. Olivia's reputation as a formidable leader was legendary, but her friendship with Tiana, forged in childhood, tempered by shared triumphs and trials, gave her arrival a personal weight that electrified the space. The tellers snapped to attention, their faces paling as they recognized their CEO. Robert's phone slipped from his hand, clattering onto the counter, his forced smile dissolving into a mask of panic. Sarah's knees buckled slightly, her hands gripping the counter for support. Jake's arms dropped to his sides, his earlier bravado evaporating, while Lisa's eyes widened, her breath hitching. The customers, sensing a shift, leaned forward, their whispers fading into a stunned silence. The elderly black woman folded her arms, her smile widening, as if justice itself had walked through the door. Olivia crossed the lobby in long, deliberate strides, her heels echoing like a metronome of judgment. She stopped beside Tiana, her gaze softening as she placed a hand on her friend's shoulder. "Tiana," she said, her voice low but resonant, carrying the weight of an apology. "I'm so sorry you had to endure this." The words were a balm, a public acknowledgement of the wrong done in her bank. Tiana nodded, her bright eyes softening for a moment, a silent exchange of trust between two women who'd faced the world's biases together. Then Olivia turned, her demeanor hardening as she faced the staff, her eyes locked onto Sarah, whose face was now ashen, her lips quivering. "You," Olivia said, her voice a blade cutting through the tension. "Are you the one who dared to question my friend's right to her own money?" Sarah's mouth opened, but no sound emerged. Her eyes darted to Robert for rescue. The manager stepped forward, his hands raised in a placating gesture. "Ms. Grant, there's been a misunderstanding," he began, his voice unsteady. "We were following protocol for such a large—" "Enough!" Olivia snapped, her tone brooking no argument. The word reverberated, silencing Robert mid-sentence. She stepped closer to the counter, her presence towering despite her modest height. "I've spoken to Tiana on the phone. I know exactly how she was treated, mocked, dismissed, insulted. And my bank—" Her eyes swept over Jake and Lisa, who shrank under her scrutiny. "You thought her clothes, her skin, made her less than you. You were wrong." The lobby was a vacuum, every ear straining to catch Olivia's next words. "Thies?" Young man with the phone angled it closer, capturing the moment. The white man in the suit shifted uncomfortably, his earlier indifference replaced by unease. The elderly black woman's nod grew more pronounced, her eyes gleaming with pride. Olivia's voice rose, not in volume, but in authority. "Elite Trust was built on integrity, not prejudice. You violated that trust and there will be consequences. She turned to Sarah, whose tears now streaked her face. You're done here, Olivia said, her words final, unyielding. Pack your things and leave. And know this, you'll never work in banking again. Not after this. Sarah gasped, a sob escaping as she clutched the counter, her world unraveling. Robert's face drained of color, his hands trembling as he realized the axe might fall on him next. Ms. Grant, he stammered, I assure you we— Save it, Olivia cut in, her eyes flashing. Your role in this will be reviewed. If I find you enabled this behavior, you'll follow her out the door. The threat hung heavy, a promise of accountability that sent a shiver down the staff. Tiana stood beside her, her canvas bag still, slung over her shoulder, her silence a powerful counterpoint to Olivia's wrath. The lobby's tension was palpable, the crowd holding its breath, waiting for the next move in this seismic confrontation. The elite trust bank's lobby was a frozen tableau, its marble floors and crystal chandeliers bearing witness to a reckoning that had shaken the room to its core. Tiana Brooks stood at the counter, her smooth brown skin radiant under the fluorescent glow, her bright eyes steady with a quiet strength that commanded respect. Her white t-shirt and faded jeans, once a source of scorn, now seemed a badge of authenticity in a space tainted by prejudice. Olivia Grant, the CEO, stood beside her, her navy suit a symbol of authority, her voice still echoing with the weight of her decree. Sarah, the teller who had mocked Tiana, was fired, her career in banking obliterated. Robert, the manager, stood pale and silent, his fate hanging in the balance. The crowd of customers, some filming, others whispering, watched with rapt attention, the air thick with the aftershocks of justice unfolding. Olivia's gaze swept the counter, her eyes settling on Sarah, whose tear-streaked face was a portrait of ruin. You have 10 minutes to collect your belongings, Olivia said, her voice cold, unyielding, each word a nail in the coffin of Sarah's tenure. Security will escort you out. She nodded to the guard, a young man named Thomas, who stepped forward, his expression a mix of discomfort and duty. Sarah's sob broke the silence, a raw, guttural sound that drew uneasy glances from Jake and Lisa, who stood frozen at their stations, their earlier smirks replaced by fear. Sarah stumbled back, her hands fumbling for her purse, her navy blazer, creased and askew, a far cry from the polished arrogance she'd wielded minutes ago. Tiana watched, her face impassive, but her heart was a tumult of emotions. She felt no joy in Sarah's downfall, only a weary recognition of the cost of prejudice, a lesson she'd learned too many times. Her mind drifted to her mother, Evelyn, waiting at the cafe, her warm smile a beacon of love that had carried Tiana through countless battles. This victory wasn't about vengeance, it was about ensuring no one else would face the same humiliation in this bank. She adjusted her canvas bag, its worn strap a reminder of her roots, her resilience. Olivia turned to Robert, her eyes narrowing. You're on notice, she said, her tone sharp enough to cut glass. I'll be reviewing every decision you've made in this branch. If I find you've fostered this kind of behavior, you'll be out the door next. Robert's face drained of color, his hands clenching at his sides, his authority reduced to a fragile shell. He nodded stiffly, his voice lost in the weight of Olivia's judgment. The crowd murmured, the elderly black woman in the corner nodding with quiet approval, her eyes gleaming with the satisfaction of seeing power challenged. Olivia's attention shifted to Tiana, her expression softening. Let's get your transaction handled properly, she said, her voice warm, a stark contrast to the steel she'd directed at the staff. She scanned the counter, her gaze landing on Emma, a young teller known for her professionalism and kindness. Emma, take over Ms. Brooks' request, now. Emma, who'd been watching from the sidelines, her brown eyes wide with awe, stepped forward, her movements swift and respectful. Yes, Ms. Grant, she said, her voice steady despite the tension in the room. Emma approached the counter, her smile genuine, her demeanor a breath of fresh air in the stifling lobby. "Ms. Brooks, I'm so sorry for what you've been through." She said her words sincere, her hands already reaching for Tiana's card and ID. "How can I assist you?" The question was a lifeline, a return to the basic respect Tiana had been denied. The crowd leaned in, their curiosity piqued by this shift from chaos to courtesy. Tiana's lips curved into a gentle smile, her bright eyes meeting Emma's. "Thank you," she said, her voice soft but resonant, carrying the weight of her dignity. She paused, glancing at Olivia, whose nod of encouragement was a silent vow of support. "I'd originally asked for $5,000, Tiana continued, her tone deliberate. "But I think that's still enough for my shopping trip with my mom." The words were a masterstroke, a retreat from her $100 million demand that wasn't surrender, but grace. The crowd's murmurs grew, some nodding in admiration, others whispering in surprise. Emma nodded, her fingers flying over the keyboard with efficiency. "I'll have that ready in a moment," she said, her screen flashing as she processed. The withdrawal, the transaction which Sarah had turned into a battlefield, was completed in under 2 minutes, the cash neatly stacked and slid across the counter in a crisp envelope. Tiana took it, her fingers brushing the paper, her smile widening as she tucked it into her bag. "You've been wonderful, Emma," she said, her voice warm. "I'll be sure to tell my mom about you." Olivia placed a hand on Tiana's shoulder, her eyes shining with pride. "Enjoy your day, Tiana," she said, her voice a promise of better things to come. Tiana nodded, her ponytail swaying as she turned to leave, her sneakers squeaking faintly on the marble. The crowd parted, their eyes following her, some with respect, others with newfound curiosity. The elderly black woman clapped softly, a "yah" gesture that rippled through the room, a quiet celebration of justice served. As Tiana reached the revolving doors, the lobby remained hushed, the weight of the moment lingering. Sarah, now escorted by Thomas, disappeared into the back, her sobs fading. Robert stood rooted, his future uncertain. Emma returned to her station, her head held high, while Jake and Lisa exchanged nervous glances, their roles in this drama yet to be judged. Tiana stepped into the sunlight, her heart light despite the ordeal, ready to join her mother and reclaim the joy of their day. The sun hung high over the city, its golden rays bathing the bustling streets in a warm glow, as Tiana, Brooks stepped out of the Elite Trust Bank's revolving doors. The weight of the morning's ordeal lingered in her smooth brown skin, but her bright eyes sparkled with a quiet triumph, her lips curving into a smile that spoke of resilience unbroken. Her white t-shirt and faded jeans, once a target of scorn, now felt like armor, her canvas bag a symbol of her unyielding spirit. Tucked inside was the crisp envelope with $5,000 secured through a battle not of wealth, but of dignity. The lobby behind her, still reeling from Olivia Grant's seismic intervention, faded into a distant hum as Tiana strode toward the cafe where her mother, Evelyn, awaited, her heart light with the promise of their shared day. The cafe, a cozy nook nestled between towering skyscrapers, was alive with the clink of porcelain and the murmur of conversation. Evelyn sat by a window, her silver-streaked hair catching the sunlight, her warm brown eyes scanning a magazine with a contented smile. At 60, she carried the grace of a woman who'd weathered life's storms, her sacrifices the foundation of Tiana's success. As Tiana entered, Evelyn's face lit up, her magazine forgotten. "There's my girl," she called, her voice a melody of love. Tiana slid into the seat across from her, the envelope placed gently on the table, her smile widening as she caught her mother's curious glance. "Had a bit of an adventure at the bank," Tiana said, her tone light but tinged with the weight of truth. She recounted the story, not with anger but with a storyteller's cadence, her words painting the scene. Sarah's sneer, the staggering balance, Olivia's thunderous arrival. Evelyn listened, her eyes narrowing at the teller's prejudice, her lips parting in pride at Tiana's defiance. "You showed them, baby," she said, her hand reaching across to squeeze Tiana's. "Just like I always knew you would." The moment was a balm, a reminder of why Tiana fought, not for herself alone, but for every soul diminished by bias. As mother and daughter left the cafe arm in arm, they ventured into the city's vibrant shopping district. The boutiques sparkled with designer dresses and gleaming jewelry. But Tiana and Evelyn's joy came from each other's company. They laughed over a pair of extravagant heels, debated the merits of a silk scarf, and shared a gelato under the shade of a sidewalk awning. The $5,000 remained largely untouched, the day's true treasure found in their shared laughter, a celebration of resilience and love. Tiana's heart swelled, the bank's indignities dissolving in the warmth of her mother's presence, her purpose renewed. Meanwhile, back at Elite Trust, the lobby was a hive of transformation. Olivia Grant stood at the center, her navy suit a beacon of authority, her voice commanding as she addressed the remaining staff. The marble floors, once a stage for prejudice, now bore witness to a new mandate. "What happened today will never happen again," she declared, her eyes sweeping over Jake, Lisa, and the others who stood in chastened silence. Robert, his fate still under review, hovered at the edge, his once assured demeanor a shadow. Emma, the teller who'd served Tiana, with respect, listened intently, her resolve strengthened by the day's events. Olivia's tablet glowed with a draft memo, its words a blueprint for change. She announced a comprehensive overhaul, mandatory anti-bias training for all employees, revised performance metrics to prioritize equitable service, and a client feedback system disaggregated by demographics to root out disparities. "Every customer deserves respect," she said, her voice a vow. "No exceptions." She unveiled a new sign, soon to grace every branch. "All clients are valued. Report any failure to this standard." Below was a hotline number, a direct line to her office, a promise of accountability. The staff absorbed her words, some nodding in shame, others in quiet agreement. Emma stepped forward, her voice tentative but clear. "Ms. Grant, I'd like to help with the training," she said, her brown eyes earnest. "I saw what happened today, and I want to make sure it's different tomorrow." Olivia's lips curved into a rare smile, her nod a seal of approval. The seeds of change were planted, fragile but determined, in a bank that had been forced to confront its flaws. Tiana's story rippled beyond the lobby, spreading through the city's financial circles. The young man who'd filmed the confrontation posted his video online, its views climbing as it sparked debates about bias in banking. Customers like the elderly black woman returned, their trust cautiously renewed, while others shared their own stories, amplifying Tiana's stand. Olivia fielded calls from board members, her resolve unshaken as she defended the reforms, her friendship with Tiana a guiding light. As dusk settled over the city, Tiana and Evelyn stood outside a boutique, their bags light, but their spirits soaring. The skyline glittered, a testament to dreams realized. Tiana's victory wasn't just a personal triumph. It was a beacon, a challenge to every institution to do better. She glanced at her mother, whose proud smile mirrored her own, and knew the fight was worth it. The future stretched before them, bright with possibility, shaped by a woman who'd turned prejudice into progress. Wow, what a journey with Tiana Brooks. Her courage turned a moment of prejudice into a powerful call for change. What did you think of her story? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Did Tiana's strength inspire you, or did Olivia's swift justice strike a chord? We'd love to hear how this resonated with you, no matter where you're tuning in from. A huge thank you for joining us on this ride. Your support keeps these stories alive. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more tales of triumph and transformation. Until next time, keep standing tall and stay true to your worth. See you soon.